Hello and welcome. This video is a summary of 3 sessions I held on higher education and AI for the National Centre for Entrepreneurship in Education, or NCEE, in the UK in April and May 2025. The sessions were quite well received, so my goal is for this video to share the main insights more widely, including internationally. Now, the overall message is that university leaders need to understand how AI could potentially impact society and in turn themselves. It's not enough to simply give staff and students an annual AI literacy training session alongside their data protection or fire safety training. There's a need to engage with AI much more strategically, and this video sets out how this might be done. So who am I? I'm Dr James Ransom. I'm a Senior Visiting Fellow at UCL Institute of Education and a Specialist Advisor to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I'm also Head of Research at NCEE. Now, I would stress that I'm not an expert on AI. Although I've been doing work in this space, my background is primarily on the role of universities in tackling societal challenges. But, as we'll see, these issues are actually quite closely linked. As a quick disclaimer, I have received some funding via the European Commission and from Open Philanthropy to explore these issues. This video is in 3 parts. Each one maps onto one of the core university functions: teaching, research, and engagement. As we advance through, we will also be taking a broader view. Part 1, teaching, looks at what's actually happening right now and is quite tangible. Part 2 on research is looking 1 to 2 years ahead and is slightly more broad and speculative in scope. And Part 3 is focused on society. That is the role of universities in society and how society will shape the role of universities. It looks 5 or so years ahead, building on parts 1 and 2 and giving you potential roadmaps or scenarios to use going forwards. Each part has a key takeaway or a key message presented at the start. You can jump to each part using the timestamps in the description below. Full slides for each session, which include links and sources, are also linked below. So let's begin. Here's how part 1 on teaching and learning will be structured. In the first third, we'll cover where we are and how students are using AI. In the middle third, I'll present 3 case studies. Try and work out what they have in common, because in a 4th case study, this factor is missing and it all ends in a little bit of a public relations disaster. And in the final third, we'll look at what's next: gaps, concerns, risks, and so on. As a quick note, some of this part was based on a paper that I wrote with a colleague, Dr Richard Whittle, which has since been published, and I link to this in the description below. So here's the key takeaway. Universities should approach AI integration strategically and embrace change thoughtfully. As a bonus takeaway, be wary of anyone who tells you what's going to happen in the future with AI, and that includes me. We simply do not know. There are educated guesses, there is pure speculation, there's some hype, and there's some fear-mongering. But my educated guess is that even if it's not apparent now, AI will be relevant for you and the work that you do and the work that your university does and how it does it in the near future. As such, there is no certainty as to how AI will impact universities. Back in 2013, this report, called An Avalanche is Coming, was published. It discussed several things, including the hugely transformative and disruptive impact that MOOCs, massive open online courses, were going to have on higher education. It turned out to be pretty inaccurate on that point. I would say that AI has a far larger chance of being an avalanche, especially given the fragility of the sector, at least in the UK, where I'm based. Now, views on AI tend to swing between a couple of extremes. One is that actually they're not as intelligent as all the hype makes out. For example, I've had a few stories of people who have asked ChatGPT for their next train to London, and it gives an incorrect answer. This is not what it's designed to do. Or they use some early versions before some of the bugs were ironed out, and perhaps haven't realised how far it's advanced since then. So if you used it a couple of years ago and were not impressed, rest assured it's moved on a fair bit. So the focus in this video will be on the current models, today's range of large language models, or LLMs, many of which are available for free, the most famous being ChatGPT. But there are a range of other models too that are highly competitive with ChatGPT. Now, these models have seen some tremendous improvements over the past 18 months, with new reasoning models, which take time to think, and models able to handle larger context windows to do data analysis, search the internet, and so on. One of the points that I will return to in detail in the next two parts is the extremely rapid pace of technological change and what this might mean. So how much are students using AI? A few interesting surveys give us an insight into the use of generative AI for learning and coursework, as well as the pace of change. A survey of 1,000 undergraduate students in the US by best colleges found 43% of respondents used ChatGPT or similar applications, 30% used AI for the majority of their assignment, and 17% acknowledged having submitted AI-generated coursework without edits. Bear in mind that this survey was conducted in March 2023, when ChatGPT was less than 6 months old. In November 2023, the Higher Education Policy Institute, HEPI, surveyed 1,250 UK undergraduates on their attitudes to generative AI tools and found 66% use AI in some form. It also found that while many students use AI as a learning aid, some incorporate it directly into their assignments. 13% of students used AI-generated text in their assessments, though most edit this content before submission. 5% of students submit AI-generated content without any personal modifications at all. Fast forward a bit more, and this third survey by QS in late 2023 polled over 1,600 students and academics globally. AI affected the choice of course, university or career path for over 1/3 of students. 80% of students used tools like ChatGPT for their studies. A fourth survey in July 2024 by the Digital Education Council found that 86% of students globally regularly use AI in their studies. This is a doubling of the US sample from a year earlier. And HEPI's 2025 survey found that student use of AI has surged in the last year, with almost all students, or 92%, now using AI in some form, up from 66% in 2024. And just to make the point really clear, here are the figures in each of those surveys from March 2023 to December 2024, a period of less than 2 years. They're not directly comparable, but they are an important signal of change. A good place to understand more is the views of students. Here are a few quotes that I've taken from various reports and blogs, mostly from HEPI, Advanced HE and JISC. All three have been doing quite good work in this space. For non-UK viewers, HEPI is a policy think tank, and Advanced HE and JISC are organisations that support UK universities. Here are two more. We are told to use, not to use it, and that's it. It seems that lecturers in the university are confused with how to proceed with it. These guidance reflect a variety of institutional positions on AI, whether it's clear guidance or a tendency to want to ban it or just outright confusion. Many UK universities do have guidance on the acceptable use of AI. Examples include guidelines and principles released by the Russell Group, representing 24 universities, and JISC have also collected AI policies and guidance from UK universities to help share good practice. A typical example I looked at is that of the University of the Highlands and Islands in Scotland, which includes guidance for teaching staff, support staff and researchers to support the effective use of generative AI for activities associated with teaching and research in ways that support and enhance practice. It also includes approved AI tools, allows staff to decide how students use it for assessment, and gives examples on how staff can use it appropriately. More practically, approaches to AI manifest somewhere between two poles. One is a short-sighted focus on trying to monitor the use of LLMs under the banner of cheating, or to try, on the other hand, to try innovative ways of integrating it into and improving teaching and learning. Let's take these in turn. AI detection tools simply don't work reliably enough, although there are some giveaway signs of AI use, although again these are easily avoided for those who know. So be wary of tools that are promised to help you. For example, Turnitin had a failed attempt to capitalize on this. More concerning is the potential use of these tools to discriminate against non-native authors by misidentifying their work as AI generated. And don't forget, academic misconduct is not new. The introduction of the internet being an example of a technology that has enabled students to cheat. So here's a good example. A professor in the agricultural sciences department at Texas A&M University failed their entire class, believing all students had submitted AI-generated work. The professor had attempted to verify this using ChatGPT, asking it if it had written the assignments. After it became clear that this detection method was not reliable, the professor reversed the failing grades. And if you spotted that the mill in the background represents an essay mill, post in the comments and you win a prize. So the alternative is to use AI to improve how we assess students, rather than to work against or to fight against the use of AI. So Utkarsh Leo, based at the University of Central Lancashire, wrote a helpful blog for LSE with some ideas. These include limiting traditional essay-style assessments to one per semester per module, increasing emphasis on real-world case studies and practical applications, incorporating internships and project presentations into formal assessment, using time-limited problem-based examinations, and recognising excellence in extracurricular activities as part of assessment. There are two other points to note here. The first is about encouraging disclosure and open discussion. So surveys suggest that students will use AI and simply not disclose it in the absence of open discussions. As Ethan Mollick puts it here, there is a natural tendency to hide AI usage, including within workplaces, and you may recognise this personally. If I use AI to do work, others will think that I'm brilliant. You don't want people to know that you're actually not that brilliant. They're afraid that you'll realise their job is redundant, or that they'll be asked to do more work. Second, we need to take the time to observe how students actually use AI. Cal Newport, a professor at Georgetown in the US and the author of several books on work and productivity, provided a helpful summary of how one particular student experimented with ChatGPT and in the process of iteration developed a deeper understanding of the technology. Here's what Newport found. He said he was not outsourcing his exam to ChatGPT. He rarely made use of the new text or revisions that the chatbot provided. He also didn't seem to be streamlining or speeding up his writing process. If I'd been Chris's professor, I would have wanted him to disclose his use of the tool, but I don't think that I would have considered it cheating. Let's now turn to how AI is being used in teaching in innovative ways. Some lecturers, such as Professor Francesc Pujol of the University of Navarra in Spain, are embracing AI fully. In the first class, he said, "Welcome to this course. There are quite a few assignments, and you will have to use ChatGPT in all of them." Part of the thinking is to level the AI playing field between teacher and student. When students know a teacher is well versed in AI tools, they will use AI to learn better and to support analytical thinking and critical reflection, rather than to merely get faster answers. He adds that instead of using it to beat the system, the students use ChatGPT constructively. So here's for some more case studies. Here's the first. So in early 2024, Cornell University in the US published a series of summaries of how 5 members of teaching staff have used AI. They've also created how to implement this in your class summaries of each, which are available for download as PDFs on their website. As a reminder, the links are in the slides, as with all the other resources mentioned here, linked below. In the first example, students are instructed on how to use AI image generators to create weird things and to explore how different prompts affect the outputs. Then they critically analyse the limitations, biases and image sources of the AI in their class discussions. Then they selected one of the prompts and images and created a 3D model, so they are alternating between AI and traditional methods to understand capabilities and constraints of different tools. The second example is about the integration of AI-generated text into academic writing. And this quote is what the instructor told students. The third example is also about image generation skills and using AI to create high-quality images. They had weekly blogs, presentations, and a final poster project. The instructor found that these tools democratized the creation of high-quality images in group projects, saying that it allowed anyone in the group to contribute effectively. The fourth example is about controversies in American politics and using AI to examine counter-arguments and definitions of key concepts and to build critical thinking skills. Now, the final example was about avoiding AI use, and students used color coding to show what their claims and supporting evidence are. This had benefits for crafting strong arguments, but it also inadvertently highlights how quickly models have moved on, because now the frontier or the latest AI models hallucinate less than they used to, and several of them can now provide citations. So this case study already needs to evolve to match this. The second case study was shared by a senior lecturer from the University of Bath with JISC. They described creating a safe environment for exploring AI as a tool for writing. On my MSc marketing course, Gen AI is optional but encouraged. Evidence shows that students feel anxious about writing and how to start assignments. To support students with this anxiety and drive early engagement with the assignment, I aim to normalise the use of Gen AI. So first, they promote it in the course handbook. Second, they run a skills session, which includes prompt development, bias, spotting hallucinations, and so on, and directs them towards a LinkedIn learning course on Gen AI that they can access at any time. Third, they use a tool called Padlet, so students have a forum to ask questions anonymously. The third case study is from the University of Sheffield, from a senior lecturer from the School of Biosciences. She describes the use of AI to create interactive sessions and encourage experimentation and deeper understanding. She uses role play to explore ethical issues around genetic screening. Here is the prompt that she encourages students to use. She explains that AI is used to explore and test ideas. The outputs are not used directly in assessed work, but students are encouraged to continue on with the chat to explore thoughts and ideas. I quote, "The students really enjoy these sessions, and the large sessions can get pretty loud. It also gives students confidence when talking about challenging topics, for example, ethics in the biosciences. These are deliberately designed as safe, low-stakes environment where students can interact with Gen AI without the fear of getting it wrong." However, we now need to travel to New Zealand and share a note of caution. So think about what the previous three case studies had in common. The lecturers and instructors are still very present. They're still there face-to-face. They're guiding students to critically use AI. None of the work has become easier in any sense. If anything, it now becomes more challenging in that students have to engage with technology and question it rigorously and come to an independent viewpoint. No professors or teaching staff or teaching assistants have been replaced. Here's a headline from the end of last month about the introduction of artificial intelligence tutors at the University of Auckland. So any perception that AI is being used to reduce teaching costs or to drive efficiencies in teaching and learning are likely to receive backlash. It's a real balancing act. but the focus needs to be on augmenting and improving teaching and learning rather than replacing it. To do otherwise is a very risky move, especially given debates around the value for money of higher education. So institutional support frameworks will become increasingly important. The work of some progressive professors may hint at what's possible, but we still have a lot to learn about how AI can improve student outcomes. As we do, this needs to be captured and carefully rolled out. It also needs to be adjusted across disciplines and adapted for different modes of learning and different student groups. So HEPI's student generative AI surveys show that a digital divide has emerged in AI usage patterns across different student demographics. This divide manifests in several ways, although it tends to exacerbate existing inequalities. So do note that this survey is UK specific. So more students from privileged backgrounds use generative AI for assessments compared with the least privileged backgrounds. There are also differences across ethnic groups, with Asian students indicating higher AI usage, while Black and white students report lower usage. Students from more privileged backgrounds are also more likely to say they expect to use generative AI in their future careers, 23%, compared to those from less privileged backgrounds, 15%. Sam Illingworth, who is a professor at Edinburgh and Napier University, recommends that universities provide student laptops that can be borrowed and free or discounted internet access, partnerships with community organisations that can provide internet access or computer lending services, and technology training to help students develop necessary skills and use AI tools effectively. So where do we go from here? A natural first focus with a transformative technology, such as large language models, especially given the perilous state of university finances, is cost-cutting, automation, efficiency. But instead, or at least in addition, the focus should be on enhancing capabilities. This is because students have very legitimate concerns that we need to be able to respond to. Here are some of these concerns. I think AI use will become the norm pretty soon, says one. Employers will expect us to be able to use it in a critical way. My passion is computing, says another, but I don't really feel accomplished. I worry that computer jobs will be replaced by AI. My colleague Richard, with whom I co-authored a paper on this topic, said this at an event just before Christmas. By focusing on critical thinking, ethical considerations, and the cultivation of uniquely human skills, universities can ensure that education remains a meaningful and enriching endeavour. It helps us to answer a question that you may have heard before. Why do you need to go to university when you can be tutored by ChatGPT? This somewhat simplistic question is unlikely to disappear anytime soon, but we need good answers. AI tutoring and personalised learning systems will prompt a shift in how universities approach education. Instead of viewing AI as a threat to traditional teaching methods, progressive institutions will recognise it as an opportunity to transform their pedagogical approaches. For example, lectures may no longer represent the most effective learning format. Instead, active learning environments enable students to engage directly with material and collaborate with peers. We may also see load sharing with AI tools for complex assignments, with students being taught how to do this effectively. It will still require students to think carefully and write clearly. I recognise that many viewers who work in universities will already be innovating in this space regardless of AI, so you'll be in a good position to answer this question. UK universities are in a financial crisis. You may not be in the UK, but you may be facing similar challenges. AI is an opportunity, but also a temptation that could worsen the sector's problems. Faced with tight budgets, universities may adopt AI reactively, prioritising cost-cutting over meaningful improvement. Automation of grading, student support and content delivery might reduce costs in the short term, but risk compromising the quality and richness of the student experience. So universities must approach AI integration strategically. AI should be seen not as a replacement for human expertise, but as a tool to augment it, supporting innovation and improving student outcomes. This requires careful planning, transparent communication, and investments in training and infrastructure. So we concluded our paper with the following. If the sector succumbs to the allure of AI as a quick fix, it risks undermining its fundamental mission to provide equitable, high-quality education and knowledge generation in an era of significant change. And just a final word of advice based on my reflections from pulling this all together. Lock-in is a real threat here. And by this I mean the significant pace of technological development, meaning that institutions who adopt static, rigid, inflexible policies risk getting fossilized and left behind. Worse still, if you lock yourself into contracts with AI models that become outdated and have committed vast sums of money for some externally managed AI solution, again, you risk getting left behind with an additional financial burden. Given the perilous state of universities, I suspect that many consultancy and tech companies are looking with hungry eyes at a desperate sector. There may be some tempting offers. There is a need for efficiency savings. I would just urge caution and not to neglect the potential of AI to boost capabilities rather than just reduce costs. And as a side note, there are some excellent guides which cover a lot of the ground on how to effectively manage technological change, adoption, and save money by working together. For example, if you haven't read this one on collaboration for a sustainable future, I recommend it. Again, linked in the slides, which are linked below. Now, depending on your perspective, the pace of change in the development of AI systems is either exciting, frightening, or for many people, they don't really see how it affects them. Some commentators think we're about to see something quite incredible happen over the next few years, where this pace will continue to accelerate. Others think that the pace of change is not sustainable. Regardless, I don't even think the impact of what's been created to date has fully been felt yet. So we'll now look at universities and research and explore what continued development in AI might mean for universities over the next few years. In part 2, we cover universities and research. I warn you now, this is going to get pretty speculative in parts as I set out how I see things going. And here's the key takeaway. Universities should prepare for the possibility that the way research is conducted is going to undergo a seismic shift. So let's talk a little bit about the pace of change. I've already needed to update this graph since I gave the original presentation. Take note of the two dotted lines. The one at the bottom is random guessing, and the other one higher up is PhD level knowledge. We can see that in the past few months, the latest so-called frontier models have passed PhD level knowledge. This basically compares the ability of the AI model against a specialist PhD with access to the internet. Note that this is for science questions. Here's another one that shows the available compute over time, and we can see that it also rises exponentially towards the end. This shape of graph is pretty familiar when we look at AI development, and we'll see similar graphs throughout this video. And here's one showing that the length of tasks AIs can do is doubling every 7 months. If graphs are not your thing, let's consider some of the views of people who don't work for the labs where this work is being done but are quite well informed. So this is US commentator Ezra Klein, saying, person after person from artificial intelligence labs, from government, has been coming to me saying, it's really about to happen. We're on a path to creating transformational artificial intelligence capable of doing basically anything a human being could do behind a computer, but better. He adds, they thought it would take somewhere from 5 to 15 years to develop, but now they believe it's coming in 2 to 3 years during Donald Trump's second term. And here is Kevin Roos, technology columnist for the New York Times, about a month ago. I believe that very soon, probably in 2026 or 2027, he says, but possibly as soon as this year, one or more AI companies will claim they've created an artificial general intelligence. He adds, I believe that most people and institutions are totally unprepared for the AI systems that exist today, let alone more powerful ones, and that there is no realistic plan at any level of government to mitigate the risks or capture the benefits of these systems. If the views of commentators don't do much for you, how about the aggregated views of people with a proven track record in making accurate forecasts about the future? Here, they forecast a 25% probability to AGI arriving within 1 to 2 years and 50% for 2 to 5 years. Or if none of this is very persuasive, we should take note of the fact that a conference on AI in Paris in February managed to attract presidents, vice premiers, and vice presidents. But it's fair enough if numbers and predictions and politicians are not enough to signal that something might be happening. If this all becomes somewhat meaningless, there's nothing better than an analogy. One of my favourites is from Yuval Noah Harari, author of Sapiens, who says that if ChatGPT is an amoeba, how do you think an AI T-Rex would look like? Or there's also a good one by Ethan Mollick, who is a professor at Wharton in the US. In his book, he says, "The AI you use today is the worst AI you'll ever use. If today's AI is Pac-Man, the future AI will be a PlayStation 6. But, as they say, past returns are no guarantee of future performance. There are people, very bright people, experts in the field, who push back on all of these predictions. Achieving artificial general intelligence is going to be very, very difficult, and it may not happen for a long time. But what if we were going to see an intelligence explosion, which could be the result of getting closer to artificial general intelligence? What if none of this does happen, but we get closer, so somewhere between where we are now and what some of these predictions suggest? What would that mean for universities? There's a chance it won't happen, but universities need to be thinking about what it could mean for them. And so this is what we're going to be covering in this part. For the rest of this part of the video, we'll travel in a time machine. We'll begin with where we just were, then we'll zoom forwards a little bit to where we are now, and then we'll continue to where we might be in 24 months. And we'll finish up with where we might be in 5 or so years. A note on terminology. So let me just add a note of caution to say that in a lot of the literature, people talk about science and research interchangeably. And much of the discussion of scientists and science is focused on technological progress. Some of the studies are specifically focused on STEM subjects and some are more general. Some findings are likely to apply to some extent to other disciplines too, but in all of the discussions that follow, there's likely to be big variation across disciplines and between different arts, humanities, social science, STEM subjects, and so on. So where were we just now? We need to talk about the state of knowledge production, and there's two key things going on here. The first is that research productivity is declining sharply. We now require 18 times more researchers than in the early 1970s to maintain the same pace of progress. Quite sophisticated studies have shown that papers and patents are increasingly less likely to break with the past or push science in new directions. Another example is drug development costs, which are doubling approximately every 9 years, demonstrating increasing difficulty in biomedical innovation. And this is despite an increase in research intensity. So we've been exponentially increasing our research efforts. Research effort in the US is over 20 times higher today than in the 1930s, and the global number of scientists doubles every couple of decades. So 75% of all scientists who have ever lived are alive today. And sources for all of these are in the slides, which are linked below. Academic papers are increasing by 4% annually, while citations are doubling every 12 years. The vastness of these publication fields is making it more difficult for scholars to get published, get read and get cited, and to have any form of meaningful contribution. It also makes it harder to find novel connections between existing knowledge, which is an essential driver of innovation. But populations are shrinking, and we've picked most of the low-hanging fruit in terms of research. So humans alone simply can't sustain an increase in research intensity. That's the recent history. Research is getting harder, despite massive and unsustainable increases in intensity. So where are we now in terms of AI in research? So there's less of a focus here on the clandestine use of AI for writing. We covered quite a bit about the writing process in the previous part of this video. But I will mention that there's plenty of evidence to suggest that AI is being used more and more to write journal articles, and that there are some blatant and unethical uses of AI that have been somehow passing through peer review and proofreading and have ended up in journals. This is perhaps more a reflection on the publishers. There have also been studies that have shown greater use of AI even without looking for bits of text that have been left in by mistake. So this study has a set of control words which appear consistently over time, and then a sharp spike in words that are commonly used by large language models in recent years. So this particular study estimates that around 1% of all peer-reviewed journal articles used AI as part of the writing process. But this is already over a year or two old, so it's likely to have skyrocketed, I think, since. There are also studies that have shown greater use of AI for peer review, again, secretively and without declaring it. So AI can certainly be useful for writing, particularly for those who speak English as a second language. It might be helpful to speed up the very slow publishing process, and it can be very effective at peer review if the assessment criteria is robust. And it's also possible to simulate REF exercises. For those of you who are not in the UK, the REF is an assessment process of the quality of research, which is used to determine research funding at UK universities. But in all of these cases, the use of AI needs to be declared and transparent. Otherwise, we end up with AI writing articles, AI reviewing articles, and AI summarising articles without humans really being involved, and without the human reader knowing that this is the case. So instead of the secretive use of AI, I'm more interested in how it's going to be used openly and deliberately to augment and perhaps replace some human researchers. So my colleague Richard used the latest ChatGPT models to create a book. First the outline, then section by section, then asking it to review and improve its own text, adding citations and proper referencing. And he's now getting a team of postdocs to fact check it. And so far they haven't found anything noteworthy. Before this, he used a much earlier model of ChatGPT to create a PhD in 2 hours. He said that it wouldn't have been a good PhD by any means, but it did resemble a PhD. But all of this, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying this, is amateur hour compared to what's coming. An important development in the past few months has been the public release of research tools that combine the large language models like ChatGPT or Claude that we're familiar with agents that go out and autonomously plan and act and do things online, and with reasoning so they can take time to think. We have examples in the form of Google's Gemini Deep Research, ChatGPT Deep Research, and you may detect a pattern here, Perplexity Deep Research, which is powered by DeepSeek, one of the open source models out of China. One that's bucking the trend is Elon Musk's tool Grok, which is called Deep Search. So these tools will take a question that you provide, ask some clarifying questions, and then go off and spend 10 minutes searching the internet, asking itself more questions, doing some more searching, pulling together all the sources, and writing a fairly analytical report. Here are a couple of people who are fairly prominent commentators on AI giving their reviews on OpenAI's Deep Research. Just remember that anyone can access this tool for less than £20 per month. Another development is increased context windows. So the context window is how much material that you can feed into the large language model to get a response. You can, particularly if you pay for the upgraded models, feed in several books and a whole collection of articles and ask specific questions of them. So this can be a huge time saver for a researcher. We also have specialised tools that claim to be able to conduct systematic reviews. I found these quite helpful for sourcing new material, but they're often limited to stuff that isn't behind a paywall, so they can only read the abstracts. But they're very good at pulling together lots of sources and providing quite targeted answers to specific questions. And they tend to perform better for questions demanding answers on things like randomised controlled trials and similar studies, and so they can end up favouring STEM subjects and economics. So this is the results of a survey conducted by Elicit. This is a tool for AI literature reviews, and they asked 17 PhD holders on how much time each one of these tools would save them when they conduct a systematic review. And you can see on average they found the list it would save them 16 hours. And there's some interesting stuff going on in the social sciences as well. Now, AI can, to a limited extent, simulate human beings, so you can reproduce famous experiments using AI. There's also been some studies where they've simulated doctors in a simulated hospital with simulated patients learning how to better diagnose diseases. There's a lot that we may be able to learn, but obviously AI agents are not humans, so we have to interpret these very carefully. And so this is pretty much where we are at the moment. Tools do not replace systematic literature reviews or experiments conducted by experts, but they can speed things up. And this reflects the broader state of AI for research. There are potentially significant time savings for researchers, and this offers some democratization. So with some money, around £20 per month for a top model, some technical ability, being able to use these models effectively and know what to ask, and most importantly, some contextual knowledge to evaluate the output, AI can sharpen the performance and efficiency of researchers. But at the same time, we are not yet replacing researchers. So where might we be in 24 months? For the next 2 years, I will focus on two elements. The first is the use of agents, and the second is how AI may affect the productivity and output of individuals in universities. And just to clarify, here's what we mean by an agent. They can go off and do things. They can operate in a physical or virtual environment or a mix of the two. We're currently seeing a flurry of prototypes of agents that are designed to automate parts of the research process. There's been work to understand and chop up the research process, automate it, and then try and stitch it all together. So one AI agent or a series of AI agents can conduct end-to-end research, from generating ideas to publishing papers. So over the next 2 years, we'll see development, refinement, and increased sophistication of these agents. See, for example, this taxonomy of hypothesis formulation, hypothesis validation, and manuscript publication, and then different tools that have been released for every part. And now for two prototype AI research examples. The first is called the AI Scientist, created by academics at the University of Oxford and the University of British Columbia, and a company called Sakana AI based in Japan. So Sakana is fish in Japanese. Here's what the creators said in their launch blog post. It has been common for AI researchers to joke amongst themselves that now all we need to do is figure out how to make the AI write the papers for us. Our work demonstrates that this idea has gone from a fantastical joke, so unrealistic everyone thought it was funny, to something that is currently possible. The AI scientist generates research ideas, writes code, executes experiments, visualizes the results, describes its findings by writing a full scientific paper, and then runs a review process for evaluation. The cost of this is less than $15 per paper. So this diagram shows the end-to-end scientific discovery process. And they've tested it. The agent created a paper from scratch, submitted it to a peer-reviewed conference, and it beat the acceptance threshold ahead of many human entries. The organisers knew of this test, but the reviewers didn't. Interestingly, the paper that was submitted reported a negative result, which is an important component of effective scientific progress. They then withdrew the paper. The code for the AI scientist is open source, and anyone can install it on their computer, if your computer is powerful enough. There are some shortcomings which the creators reckon they'll fix quite soon, including generating some tables that don't fit on pages and not having vision capabilities, so it can't fix things like graphs that are not very readable. There are also many ethical issues that the creators highlight, including the potential to create an overwhelming number of papers and overload publishing systems, and unintended harms. So these harms are particularly around biological materials and so on, if later iterations are given access to laboratories and can conduct actual experiments, or the creation of computer viruses and so on. The second example is the Agent Archive Framework for Autonomous Research Collaboration. This builds on things like the AI scientist and imagines a future with many AI laboratories. This enables them to feed in their findings to a central repository and learn from each other, enabling AI laboratories to build on each other's findings and, in theory, to accelerate scientific progress. So this mirrors the scientific discovery process, where work is often the result of many individual researchers or group of researchers incrementally building on each other's work or combining previous ideas. And the creators found agents that have access to the archive achieve higher performance compared to those working in isolation. What do these agents mean for researchers in the next few years? The creators of the AI Scientist say this: "We do not believe that the role of a human scientist will be diminished. If anything, the role of a scientist will change and adapt to new technology and move up the food chain." In reality, I suspect that some researchers will greatly benefit. Think of the Pareto principle, where a minority of researchers tend to have the greatest number of citations, impact, etc. These sorts of power relationships are likely to be enhanced by AI, with some researchers disproportionately benefiting, and not necessarily those who are currently in the top 20%. The vast majority of researchers are probably not going to move up the food chain, but I think there's some other aspects of AI that will benefit researchers in the short term. This includes using AI to enhance communication, so reframing research to make it relevant to different stakeholder groups is something that can be easily done with AI. Similarly, it can help promote interdisciplinarity by making research from other fields more accessible. And over the next couple of years, AI will increasingly do more of the heavy lifting of research tasks under the expert guidance of academics. We'll see more disclosure statements in papers along the lines of "this section was assisted by AI." Issues like AI-generated misinformation making it into academic work could surface. Say, an AI misquotes a source and a researcher doesn't catch it, leading to a retraction or a correction. And such incidents will be learning experiences that tighten protocols. And also, the avalanche of papers that we saw at the start is going to continue, although a great and growing number of these are going to be AI created. AI might become an intermediary or a layer between all the research work and the researchers themselves. So this brings challenges and opportunities, and we'll pick up some of these in the next and final part. So where might we be in 5 years? The Alan Turing Institute, which is the UK's National Centre for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence, set up an AI Scientist Grand Challenge in 2020. It calls for the creation of an AI system capable of making Nobel-quality scientific discoveries in an autonomous way by the year 2050. If some AI researchers are to be believed, we have a very good chance of completing this grand challenge well before 2050. Take, for example, a report called "Preparing for the Intelligence Explosion," released in March 2025 by Finn Morehouse and William MacAskill. MacAskill is also a professor of philosophy at Oxford and one of the leading figures behind the effective altruism movement. They make the point that AI cognitive labour, as they call it, is growing more than 500 times faster than total human cognitive labour. They say that the amount of research that AI can do is still well below the amount coming from humans, but if it continues growing at its current rate, it'll soon overtake humans. See this graph with its familiar shape. They make the point that progress will be different across various subjects, so those that lend themselves more to theoretical reasoning may progress faster than those that require expensive or slow experiments. And as AI becomes smarter, it will be able to train in turn smarter AI systems, in theory driving an intelligence explosion. The paper is quite detailed and it covers a lot of the caveats, different types of diminishing returns, the likelihood of progress being sustained, and the different components of this, and so on. They have fairly complex modelling where they land on a conservative scenario, suggesting we might see a century of technological progress within 10 years. Just let that sink in for a second. A century of technological progress within the next 10 years. For my final few comments, I will take a step back. As I said at the start, we don't really know whether this is actually going to happen or whether we might see a lesser variation of this. But I think it's really important that universities take a moment to think, if some variation of this does happen, what might it mean for you? Above all, if it does happen, is this intelligence explosion likely to take place in universities? Or will it be centralised in and controlled by the large AI labs who own all the chips? The centre of power, the investment, the talent is not in universities. All of these things are mostly centred in the US and to a lesser extent China, not in our financially struggling universities, in the UK at least. See here analysis by Tortoise Media that looks at investment, innovation and implementation of AI, and you can see the US way out in front, followed by China and the UK in fourth place. So the UK has an AI Opportunities Action Plan, which looks to increase UK computer capacity by at least 20 times by 2030. And there are some supercomputers in Bristol, Cambridge and Edinburgh, but we're still a long way behind the US and China. Apologies to non-UK audiences. Again, it will be good to get some perspectives from elsewhere in the comments. And just to cheer everyone up in the UK, France's biggest supercomputer is 3 times more powerful than the UK's equivalent. Much of the UK's expertise and leadership in AI has been through Google DeepMind, which is an American-owned company. So this zoomed out graph of all 73 countries included in the analysis shows how far behind the UK is and how far ahead the US is. But I'm guessing China will close the gap a little in the next version. So what might this all mean? So there are some risks we have to consider here. The first is that this activity, as things stand, is likely to be owned by AI labs and not universities. Big tech owns the platforms. As a result, there's a risk of over-concentration of power in tech-funded research and the interests of these companies. There may be blind spots in the AI systems, including biases in the training data or favouring AI capabilities. So focusing on research where AI tends to do better and neglecting those where it's not as competent. So this may or may not map onto some of those domains where AI is being used more. So for example, STEM versus arts, humanities and social sciences. If it can't be completely automated, it won't accelerate. As a result, there may be more research done in areas where the AI is capable, as it's cheaper to do research in these areas than hiring humans. There are also associated risks with highly competent AI about giving access to laboratories to conduct live experiments, and we're already seeing some fully automated labs, although these are rare at the moment. And then the need for top-grade security to prevent hacking of the systems and so on, which is a whole separate discussion. So what might this mean? My best guess at how this will play out, and this is a guess, the brightest, most successful academics who are also technically literate and understand AI will be fine. They will oversee hybrid AI-human teams in research labs across both STEM and non-STEM, but this will be highly uneven across disciplines. Researchers who don't fit this category at financially struggling institutions are perhaps in trouble. It also points to a future where universities, at least based on the UK model, are no longer such important centres of research. Instead, we need to look at the separation between key researchers and universities. So one can imagine a future where a few researchers with prestige, expertise and broad contextual knowledge direct research projects at or funded by AI labs, and in turn add legitimacy and a human face to the research output. How would this work in practice? Would universities be compensated? Would research funding agencies still fund projects within universities, or would they fund individuals to conduct that research, however is most effective? Is the future university one that conducts research, or one that analyses and translates it into practice, acting as a bridge to society? And so we'll explore this topic in the final part of this video. I will finish where we started with the key takeaway. Universities should prepare for the possibility that the way research is conducted is going to undergo a seismic shift. And now for part 3, universities and society. So here's how this part will be structured. First, we're going to talk about a computer game. Second, we're going to visit Sweden. And then we're going to dive into 5 scenarios. So a few years ago, a Dutch think tank asked me to write an article about universities and cities. I decided to write a half-joking description of a game called Sim University for them. Some of you may have heard of or even played the SimCity games, which were especially popular in the 1990s. You had to build and grow and manage a city, balancing all kinds of decisions, dealing with crises and helping it to grow. In my idea for Sim University, you became a vice-chancellor or a president, and you would have to manage your own university. You could choose what goals you had, top the league tables and attract international students, or become a pillar of the local community, helping the disadvantaged and working with small businesses. You'd have to deal with the board of governors that are harassing you about budgets, and the Ministry of Education are on your back. Local newspapers are watching what you're doing, and students are looking to have fun and then get jobs after graduating. You could build shiny buildings or open overseas campuses and incubation centres. Maybe you have a star academic that's causing trouble. Do you fire them or do you promote them? You would have to guide your university through lots of crises that pop up. In writing this article, I did research into the original SimCity and found a couple of quite interesting things. First, it was pretty realistic, and urban planners used it to test ideas, so you could explore the relationship between things like crime rates and expanding rail networks. Apparently, the traffic models were more advanced than those most traffic engineers used in real life. Second, SimCity has been used as a test of competence for leaders. So in 1990, there was a Democratic primary election in Rhode Island in the US, and the local newspaper invited 5 candidates for mayor to play a game of SimCity against each other. One didn't take it very seriously and built loads of police stations, swapped the electric power plant for a nuclear one, and bulldozed the churches, and she went on to lose the election. In 2002, the candidates for mayor in Warsaw, Poland played SimCity. The man who won that competition ended up winning the election and eventually became the president of Poland. Now, I'm not necessarily suggesting that we should develop SimCity, Sim University, and it should become part of the selection process for university vice-chancellors, but I do think we can learn from testing ideas in a playful setting and seeing where we end up. In the SimCity game, you could run different scenarios like an alien landing in a city, or you had to try and develop a city in an earthquake zone, and you would then have to deal with all the issues and complexities that would come out of this. And we'll return to Sim University in the final part of this section. Universities will fail in their civic duty if they do not engage with possible future trajectories of AI. So each of the previous parts had a key takeaway, and this is the takeaway for part 3. Now, this might mean that your university has a serious look at what might happen in the future and decide that the risk, opportunity and challenge is minimal. You reflect on this and then develop strategy accordingly. This is fine. It might be that your university decides there's a small chance of rapid change and also invests and plans accordingly. What I would deem a failure is a university that does not consider the possibility of great impacts on society, on their neighbours, from AI, and is instead narrowly focused on, for example, the implications of AI for student essay writing. So let's now visit Sweden. Now, I don't mean to pick on Sweden here because I studied in Sweden for 2 years and I have very fond memories. What makes Sweden a good case study is that it has a strong and relatively well-supported higher education sector. And secondly, there's been some interesting recent research. So this article was published in the prestigious Regional Studies Journal earlier this year by researchers at LSE and the University of Southampton. Around 30 public higher education institutions are analysed. These are a mixture of research universities and those with a vocational focus. Sweden had a deliberate policy spreading these throughout the regions, designed to be at the heart of local innovation systems. So one of the arguments that universities and their supporters have shouted loud about is how they are central to economic development, that they have a huge role in helping society in terms of employment and business support, and making towns and cities nicer places to live. But this article quite persuasively makes the case that universities are not always fulfilling this function, and there are 3 main conclusions. First, greater research intensity correlates with a negative effect on local income. Second, higher education institutions do not significantly contribute to local human capital. And third, the translation of innovation and knowledge faces many difficulties, including limited collaboration with local business and a lack of alignment with industry needs. So I'm discussing this for 2 main reasons. One is that we should never take for granted that universities are automatically important development actors in their community. Some spend Some spend small fortunes on economic impact reports to try and demonstrate this, but these studies don't tell the whole story, and I believe are mostly meaningless for local communities. And this is coupled with endless self-promotion, which is a byproduct of the global higher education system, league tables and so on. And it's greatly complicated by the financial crisis that universities are currently facing. The second is that there is an opportunity in here, and one that is closely related to our discussion of AI. Universities should be playing a leading role in discussions about the impact of AI on society. They should be shaping policies and having wide-ranging discussions about how this may affect the future. So what if we're in the middle of a small window right now to shape how the next 10 years or so will pan out? And I think this is a local, regional effort. Universities are not alone in trying to understand what AI may mean. They need to be listening to and working with local businesses, local government, healthcare providers on what this all means. And as a result, there's an opportunity for this third pillar of societal engagement to be really important. We're now going to wrap everything up by exploring 5 scenarios. As I go through them, think about what resonates with you, what sounds plausible. The 5 scenarios we'll go through are drawn from an annex in this publication by the UK's Government Office for Science, published in late 2023, so 18 months ago. It was published as part of the preparation for the launch of the UK AI Safety Institute, which is now the AI Security Institute. So, a few things to note before we dive in. First, the authors are UK-based, and there's been numerous UK academics and even a UK Vice-Chancellor who were part of the group that informed it. But I think it's pretty applicable anywhere. Second, there's a focus on risk rather than opportunity, so bear that in mind. Plus, the focus is on frontier AI, which they define as the most capable models available. This focus on risk means that it may come across as a little bit pessimistic, or, as someone pointed out in the seminars that I was running, quite dystopian. Third, these scenarios take place in the year 2030, so 5 years from now, or 7 years from when this was published. And fourth, they are not exhaustive. They're just a flavour of some of the possibilities, and they are not predictions. And they're not on a sliding scale, so they don't go from no impact to lots of impact. For example, they're all quite different. We may see a blend of approaches. In our seminars, one person pointed out that it may be better to view them as, for example, a pie chart with each section weighted differently. And fifth, I've extrapolated the impacts on universities from the scenarios, so you won't find this in the original document. Each scenario would demand a different university preparation and response, and I've done some initial thinking on this. So here are the 5 scenarios. Scenario 1 is unpredictable advanced AI. And I'll just read the excerpts from the report. So in scenario 1, in the late 2020s, new open source models emerge, capable of completing a wide range of tasks with startling autonomy and agency. These agents can complete complex tasks that require planning and reasoning, and can intersect with and interact with one another flexibly. Once a task is set, they devise a strategy with sub-goals, learning new skills or how to use other software. AI-based cyber attacks on infrastructure and public services become significantly more frequent and severe. When powerful new AI is released, skills inequalities widen. Startups with higher skilled workers and a higher risk appetite quickly surge ahead and disrupt existing markets. One cause for optimism is a series of rapid science discoveries enabled by academics adopting new AI tools. So what does this mean for universities? Open source means that universities and academics can use these models directly and freely, and there are research breakthroughs. Cyber attacks on infrastructure also affects universities, requiring investment in defence and resilience and supporting partners. There's a widening and rapidly changing skills divide. So how do universities respond to this? In scenario 2, AI disrupts the workforce. Concerns over the exhaustion of high-quality data led labs to acquire or synthesize new datasets tailored for specific tasks, leading to progress in narrow capabilities. By 2030, the most extreme impacts are confined to a subset of sectors, but this still triggers a public backlash, starting with those whose work is disrupted and spilling over into a fierce public debate about the future of education and work. By 2030, there is significant deployment of AI across the economy, driven by improvements in capability and the opportunity this offers to reduce costs. This is most highly concentrated in certain sectors: IT, accounting, transportation, and in the biggest companies who have the resources to deploy new systems. This transition favours workers with the skills to oversee and fine-tune models, resulting in greater inequality. Public concern focuses on the economic and societal impacts, mainly rising unemployment and poverty. So what does this mean for universities? Significant job losses in particular sectors means massive government and public demand for reskilling and adult education. AI systems are narrow and owned by a few large companies, so this has implications for university research, which in these domains is increasingly supported by big labs. And third, there is fierce public debate, including around things like UBI. What role do universities play as a space for this debate, for critique, for policy support, for evidence and analysis? Scenario 3 is an AI Wild West. Throughout the 2020s, there have been moderate improvements in AI capability, particularly generative AI, such as the creation of long-form, high-quality video content. It is now easy for users to create content that is almost impossible to distinguish from human-generated output. There is a diverse AI market in 2030. Big tech labs compete along startups and open-source developers. Some of the most advanced models are released by authoritarian states. A big increase in misuse of AI causes societal unrest, as many members of the public fall victim to organised crime. Businesses also have trade secrets stolen on a large scale, causing economic damage. There are job losses from automation in areas like computer programming, but this is offset to some extent by the creation of diverse new digital sectors and platforms based on AI systems, and the productivity benefits for those who augment their skills with AI. However, concerns of an unemployment crisis are starting to grow due to the ongoing improvements in AI capability. So what does this mean for universities? Businesses need support and guidance. Universities are also targets. Again, support is needed for those who have lost their jobs and reskilling, but there are also new sectors to work with and support. The erosion of trust has serious implications, from verifying student credentials to authenticating research. Can universities stand out as trusted actors? Scenario 4 is advanced AI on a knife edge. A big lab launches a service badged as AGI, and despite skepticism, evidence seems to support the claim. Many beneficial applications emerge for businesses and people, which starts to boost economic growth and prosperity. The system is seemingly able to complete almost any cognitive task without explicit training. For example, it possesses an impressively accurate real-world model and has even been connected to robotic systems to carry out physical tasks. The increase in AI capability during the 2020s resulted in widespread adoption by businesses. Although this caused disruption to labour markets, some employers are using tools to augment rather than displace workers and are using gains to implement shorter working weeks. Most people are happy to integrate these systems into their daily lives in the form of advanced personal assistants. And given AI is also playing a role in solving big health challenges, many feel positive about its impacts on society. However, with the recent development of an AGI, the public is becoming more aware of potential bigger disruptions on the horizon, including potential existential risks. So what does this mean for universities? Shorter working weeks create new opportunities for universities in lifelong learning, personal development, and leisure education as people have more free time. Presumably, university staff also have more free time. Universities have benefited from the rising tide of prosperity, but have they become complacent? Are they helping to shape the future? Are their business models able to withstand AGI? Have some specialised in, for example, ethical reasoning, creativity, human oversight of AI systems? Research excellence shifts dramatically towards large tech companies with AGI capabilities, with universities becoming secondary partners or applied research centres to a greater extent than in scenario 2. The fifth scenario is called AI disappoints. AI capabilities have improved somewhat, but only just moving beyond advanced generative AI and incremental rollout of narrow tools to solve specific problems. Many businesses have also struggled with barriers to effective AI use. Investors are disappointed and looking for the next big development. There is mixed uptake, with some benefiting from AI and others falling victim to malicious use, but most feel indifferent. Those few with the right skills enjoy the benefits of AI, but many struggle to learn how to effectively use the temperamental AI tools on offer. Some companies marketing AI-based products avoid disclosing their use of AI in case it impacts sales. So what does this mean for universities? Productivity continues to stagnate. The same questions continue to be asked of universities about employable graduates, knowledge exchange, and so on. The sector's cautious approach to AI adoption appears vindicated. Business models continue mostly unchanged. Universities that didn't cut humanities, arts, and social sciences courses see a resurgence. And research shifts towards alternative emerging technologies like quantum computing and fusion energy, benefiting institutions with strengths in these areas. In the seminars, I asked the audience to vote on 3 questions. You may like to think about how you would vote before I reveal how the audience responded. I asked AI, Claude, to turn the scenarios into movie slogans so you're able to remember them effectively. I won't read them all out, but here were the first 2. And here are the next 3. So the first question I asked the audience was, which scenario do you think is most likely for 2030 of the 5 scenarios? And the top response was AI disrupts the workforce, and the second was the AI Wild West. I then asked, which scenario do you personally hope for? And the top one, interestingly, was AI disappoints. The second was AI on a knife edge. So quite different responses to the first question. And the third scenario, which scenario should your university prepare for? And these mirrored the first question. So the top one was AI disrupts the workforce, and the second was AI Wild West. So interestingly, they did think that their university should prepare for the scenario they thought was most likely. There could have been an outcome where they thought the most extreme example should have been the one that they prepared for, but arguably they're all pretty extreme. So we now return to my somewhat tenuous link to Sim University. So I think that we should be running SimCity style scenarios for our universities. Most universities already do modelling or scenarios work, especially around finances and student recruitment and so on. But let's swap the SimCity scenario of aliens landing in your city to, for example, AI replacing 70% of local labour markets. Scenarios should force you to engage with the unexpected in a safe environment, with some randomness, with incomplete information. These scenarios force you to make tough decisions, to invest, and to think of your environment as a system that you need to strengthen and work with, considering second and third order effects and how these in turn affect you. Society, of course, can't be reduced to a game, however complex it might be, but this can be a useful exercise. You might find a 10% likelihood of an extreme transformation, but this would change 90% of what you would do. So what do you do next? I will finish where we started with the key takeaway. And just a reminder, because I can see how this could be misunderstood, that what I'm saying is that universities need to take this seriously, even if ultimately you decide that there won't be significant change. Or you might decide that some changes, some preparation is needed. So thank you for listening. You can contact me and keep updated via the blog in the description below.